All right, let's get going here. Okay. Special thank you to me.
As it needs to be followed as a sponsor, it feels better.
We'll see. I got bigger plans.
I don't.
Schus refuah shlema for my father-in-law, Shiur Nevardik. Mordechai ben Yocheved. This Schus refuah shlema for Chaim
Gittel Esther.
and Gittel Esther. As I remember it. There's another Chaim also. I'm doing this refuah shlema for that. I'm forgetting the rest of his name. But they should all have refuah shlema. Seich Shar Chayil Yisrael. Okay. So we're moving on. We're going to do get Hanasha again. Not review again. We did last week, but move on. But continue to discuss the Inyanim. At the end of shiur last week, I talked about the concept in get Hanasha that even though we hold, let's say, Ein Begidim B'Nais and Tam, and it's not B'Chefetz and Achila, but Afal Pikein, based on the Shittas Rambam, Mefarshim say that there's a svara called Achshaveh, that either the Torah is Machshaveh as an Achila sometimes, or the person themselves could be Machshaveh as an Achila in certain situations. Okay, the Minchas Chinuch moves on and discusses another very fascinating Inyan. It was touched on last week. Someone brought it up. I forget who, but it's the Inyan of Ben Pekua, the whole sugya of there's different dargas and different levels, but essentially the idea being that you shechta an animal and you find another animal, you find a fetus inside, or even a live animal that's ready to roll and ready to go and have fun. What is the halachic status of this animal? And be'etzem, the psak halach is based on a drasha in the Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara says that this animal now is not toin shchita. It does not need shchita anymore. There are certain other important nafkaminas of it. It can there are in B'negei Hilchos Tarfus in terms of what we call glat kosher. It doesn't have to be glat, and there are many halachas that we keep about a regular shchita of a behema that does not apply to what we call this animal. This ben pekua is the expression that's used for it. That came out from a mother who had already been shechted. That it's a special halachic status that applies. It became a very popular discussion. I don't know how many years back this was going already, but there was this guy in Australia and in certain places near Yisrael. They wanted to make a whole farm of ben pekua animals, and they have it here, right? It's been discussed. It's been a hack about making in order to avoid lots of make it a lot easier and a lot more cost efficient. We're going to talk about get Hanasha. But in order to avoid a lot of issues, they're going to make whole farms just full of ben pekua animals, basically, keep them completely monitored and make sure no other animals get in, and that would be matir a lot of problems.
These animals that have another animal from them, so this is
They would, as long as they're both ben pekuas, it could keep going for days. You could have huge herds of animals that don't need shchita.
the issue of traphus and things in the list.
It's not that there is no issue. Once the animal gets up and starts walking around, midrabanan, it is considered an issue and would need shchita. But it's a lot of kulas. It's a lot more kal because it's only drabanan. It has you can save a lot of parts of it, and including potentially chaylev and get Hanasha. So we discussed tonight that you can use the whole back part of the animal. You can have your authentic filet mignon, and not have to remove the sciatic nerve or other stuff. It hasn't been accepted or something. What?
Does the parent have to be like kosher regarding treifa? Like if the parent, the mother's treifa, is that possible?
If the mother that was originally shechted was a treifa, I think the mother can't be a treifa, the original mother. But afterwards, then, right. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so. Now there is a discussion in Rishonim that was just mentioned. What is the story with chaylev, and what is the story with get Hanasha? Some Rishonim are of the opinion that both do not apply. That there is no isur chaylev on a ben pekua and there's no isur get Hanasha on a ben pekua. The reason being, the Gemara darshans. How do we know why is this ben pekua not need shchita? What kind of din? This the Gemara says there's a drasha. The psukim say any animal that has split hooves and chews its cud can be eaten, and then the pasuk repeats itself with another word ba behema. And there's an extra, there's a superfluous word babehema there in the pasuk. So Zok the Gemara, kol babehema. We make a drasha. Everything that's in the animal is allowed to be eaten automatically. That's a drasha. Say kol babehema is marba everything. Everything is allowed to be eaten. Who had the chaylev of it? Within the Ganasha, the entire thing can be eaten, and the longest way it's Pashas understood is that this animal is not its own animal. It's just like an aver. It's a limb of the mother that it came out of, and the mother was already shechted. And something that's a limb of something else doesn't have the din Ganasha, and it doesn't have its own din chaylev. Even they're saying, even those forbidden fats that are found particularly in the back parts of the animal are not included in this. That's one sheet in the Rishonim. Other Rishonim. And Shittas Rambam is that both things do apply, both Gid Hanasha and the halacha of chaylev does apply to this ben pekua. Then there are Rishonim who split it down the middle. They say that chaylev does not apply, but Gid Hanasha does apply to it. And the question is, what's from the Rishonim? What's the split? If you're going to say the lumdus is kol babehema, you're going to make this drasha kol babehema ter chaylev, you're allowed to eat the entire animal, including this ben pekua, and that includes everything, including the chaylev. Chaylev is chayv kares. It's even more chamer than a Gid Hanasha. So if it's going to include the chaylev, the forbidden fat, so koshkein, it should not koshkein at least, but at least as a mamatzinu, it should be that it should include Gid Hanasha as well. Why are you splitting the two and being asering one and not asering the other?
Aver min hachai does it apply?
Does aver min hachai apply on it?
It's just an animal, right? And the inside.
I don't. There's a lot of ins and outs. It's a whole Simon Shulchan Aruch. We're not here to learn the whole Simon Shulchan Aruch. I don't remember now. Well, none of this is meant to be relied upon Alech L'mayis. So you learn the Simon Shulchan
That's the only thing. The Avos ate the Aver min hachai from Ben Pekua.
That's not
On Shabbos or something.
There is one thing like there's a Meshech Chochmah. Meshech Chochmah talks about B'nageh Cholav or something that he says the Cholav of the Ben Pekua is no din Cholav and you can eat with basar. I mean, there's a lot here, a lot of details. So what will be shot in this sheet that splits chaylev and Gid Hanasha. So Minchas Chinuch wants to suggest the following svar. The Placey says that Minchas explains that dam applies to the animal. That even the shittas will hold that Gid Hanasha and chaylev is mutar on a ben pekua, get everything, but you cannot eat the dam of it. You can't eat the blood. Those assume apply. So the question is why if the kol babehema should include the dam as well? So no, because it says kol babehema ter chaylev. You can do an achila on whatever is part of the behema. It says dam is a liquid. Dam is shtia. Dam's not achila. So it was never matter to do shtia sabehema. It was only matter to do achila of the ben pekua. That's how the place he wants to explain why dam is different than chaylev and Gid Hanasha. So Zakta Meshech Chochmah, if we hold ein begidim nois and tam, if we hold there's no tam for a gid, and you're not chayv mitam achila, for example, the Rambam last week that I mentioned said that if you eat a chazer, and if you eat the Gid Hanasha of a chazer, you're not over any yisur. You're not over Gid Hanasha because it's a behemah tamei. You're not over chazer because ein begidim nois and tam. It's not achila. It's like there achila. So Zakta Minchas Chinuch, since it's not considered achila, so we're not matir from kol behemah ter chaylev. The same way the place is saying that you can't be matir the blood because it's shtia, so you're not matir the Gid Hanasha either because it's not achila. It's like eating something. It's not eating something. It's not considered an achila, and the mela therefore the drasha cannot be matir it. Therefore, Rishonim are okay splitting hairs here and saying we're matir chaylev because that's kol behemah ter chaylev. You're allowed to eat the chaylev. That's clear in the drasha. But we're not matir Gid Hanasha because Gid Hanasha was never achila anyway. The same way we're not matir dam. We're not matir Gid Hanasha. It's a very nice svar. The one pick book on it is that I mentioned that there is a din achila on the gid l'mashal v'negei achshavei. That when we say when you are being over Gid Hanasha, it's considered an achila, or let's say the Minchas Chinuch himself had an opinion that when a person wants to be machshav this as an achila, it becomes an achila. Meaning that it's not, when you say ein begidim nois and tam, it just means it's not automatically, it's not objectively an achila for everybody. But it can become achila when someone is treating it as such. So the point is, there's still achila that's shaykh by it. But as opposed to dam is not achila. Dam is in its nature, it's just shtia. Here it can be achila haraya. You can be machshav it as achila, like by the case of Gid Hanasha and avela, and be over Gid Hanasha and avela. So it's not exactly the same thing. It's a cute svar. It's not exactly the same thing between shtia sadam and chila of the Gid Hanasha.
If someone starts chewing on a bark of arla, it's like, is that chal and chila? No, but I'm saying it's still usher.
Okay, so what are you trying to say? Therefore, what?
So this get a nasha, even though it's not an achila, I'm saying.
Yeah, but he said, but the drasha is kol ba behema toichelu, so it has to be achila to be usher. You're questioning on the Minchas Chinuch svara, or the question on?
It's like, no matter what, if this is not chal an achila, it's not an achila.
But that's exactly my point. Is that we do see it's chal shem achila. L'chol pachas you can be machshavit.
Okay, and the same thing. And what about someone starts chewing on a piece of pork?
That's not food. That's not food. This is saying the fact that you see that you can be machshavit says it is food. That's exactly the difference. You can't if you eat this table. You're not machshavit. It's not food.
What is the food else? Als das bnei adam or else you?
Whatever. I don't know what the difference is between the two things. But even if it's out to you, the fact that you can be machshavit, you see it is halfway. It's a quasi achila enough that you can at least be machshavit in achila. You can't be machshavit anything in achila.
Does it have nutrients?
I don't know.
Then it is
Assume there's some.
How is it not enough?
But the point is, as far as the halachas of achila are concerned, the Rambam says it's not considered achila in begunas and tam. L'moshe b'negeya chazer, that you're not overeating chazer by eating this. That's exactly what I'm saying. Right? That's the point I'm making. Right? It is a food. It's halfway. It's a quasi food that you can be machshavit.
This is a sorry, I guess inner ears in general. So how is someone I've heard if let's say he drinks a cup of
He's over this, or because the Torah said you're not allowed to do that.
there's no achila in that.
Who said it has to be achila by dam? No, dam doesn't. When the Torah says something is us, you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. It doesn't matter that. Just like when the Torah says you can't get an ash, you're not allowed to get an ash. It doesn't matter that in beginning of and tam. When the Torah says you can't eat dam, you can't eat dam. We don't care. But the point is we can't drink it. Right. He's just saying it, but it's not achila, it's shtia. That's what Rabbi Baruch is saying. So the Minchas Chinuch is comparing that to get a nasha, saying the same way dam is not achila, it's shtia. Who wouldn't get a nasha since aim beginning of dam? It's like a bark. It's like eating a table, eating a nasha. But that's not true. It's not the same thing as eating a table. That's an important thing out. It could be machshav.
Rabbi Baruch talks about certain foods that are considered. Or what he calls it. No matter who eats it, you're not going to make a bracha on it regardless.
Okay, bracha might be different. Breaking brachas might need an objective hana. Not actually is not enough to make a bracha on something.
It's a different.
Yeah.
I always thought dinner, if it becomes a dinner.
I've never heard this far. Actually, I don't believe there's a din actually been a get brachas, but it's.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, I hear the point. I hear the difference, but I think by brachas we'd say not. It has to be more objective. Okay. Moving on in the Minchas Chinuch, he continues to discuss this Ben Pekua case, and he brings us far again from the Placey, from Yonis and Eifshitz, and says as follows: that even if you hold like the Shitas that there is a Gid Hanasha there is an Isser Gid Hanasha on the Ben Pekua, that's only, at least they're talking about. I believe they're talking about Chalif, the Placey, but he's going to be Madama to Gid Hanasha. But either way, he says that's only on the parts that were there on the part of the Gid or the Chalif that was there before it was born. Once it's now out, and its mother's been shechted already, and it has a din to be nishchat, whatever grows afterwards can't be usher, can't be get on usher. This animal is a walking shechted animal, right? At least midiraisa. So when it's walking around, it's considered shechted already. So whatever grows afterwards is not going to be usher and get on usher. It's only the gid that was there at the time it was shechted. Whatever grows afterwards is not considered usher. Okay, so my nafshkamina, you still have the part of the gid. Let's say that's usher. It's usher when it is. So Minchas Chinuch says for the case of gid hanasha, he says as follows: the halacha is that if a person, in order to be chayiv malchus, you need to eat a kazayas, right? However, there's a halacha that even if you don't eat a kazayas, if you eat a beria, if you eat a complete thing, this is very important when it comes to bugs. Right, bugs. You can be over the issur deraisa of achila even without chatzi shiur by eating even the tiniest bit of bugs because it didn't bury it. It's also not bottle because of that. What?
It's a full bug.
If it's a full bug, it's problematic. It has a lachas of a beria, and that's more chomer. You're over even less on a kazayas, and there's no bittul on it. So who didn't begin anosha? There's no bittul on it if it's a beria, and you're also chayiv malchus for eating even less than a kazayas. But zaktim Minchas Chinuch, if you ate half of if you ate this gid hanasha, it was in the animal when his mother was shechted, but now it grew up into a big cow now, and the gid hanasha is much larger. So that you will not be chayav mitam beria for eating the gid hanasha, even if it's less than a kazayas, because of the fact that half of it beria's only problem. This is the chiddush of Minchas Chinuch. Beria is only as far when the entire beria is aser. Even if the gid hanasha itself is a beria, it's a full gid hanasha, but if half of it is aser and half of it is mutter, you don't have the svara of beria. That's what the Minchas Chinuch wants to say. The whole svara of beria only applies when the entire thing is also aser. The entire bug is aser. That's a beria. If a bug was a beria, it was a full bug, but it was half aser, half mutter. That would not have the svara of beria.
Itself is also the whole gid.
No, he's saying only part of it is aser because the part that grew after it was born is not aser. That's what he's saying. The gid grows, it continues to expand, and the part that grew afterwards is not aser. So it's not a beria, and therefore now, that because it's already considered shechted. You can't have something can't have something that only comes into existence after it was shechted become aser. That's as far that the place he says. What? It was shechted when his mother gets shechted. It takes on a din shechted already. So now it comes out. It's this tiny little calf, right? It has a gid hanasha. It's aser now. If you hold the gid hanasha as aser in the ben pekua, if you hold the gid hanasha as aser ben pekua, so it has a shem beria right now. But once it grows a little bit, he's saying it loses a shem beria because it's partially aser, and it is partially mutter. Okay. So now a couple things about this. He's assuming again that the svara of beria, which is an important svara that we apply all over in halacha, only applies when the entire thing is aser. If half of the beria is aser and half of the beria is mutter, it would not apply. That may depend on what the lumdus of beria is. Lamasha, you have an afkamina like this. Let's say you have by morer, right? Your father's probably made you eat a kazayas of morer, right? And sometimes they make even old ladies eat a kazayas of morer, and it's very hard. Or little kids who hate it, but they have to eat a kazayas, right? If they're doing the mitzvah right. Now the shaila is, why can't you eat one whole stalk of morer and say it's a beria? That's it. I want to get my kazayas by eating a whole stalk. Right. So you just eat a whole thing and say that's it, beria. I am not it. Well, it's shiur is kazayas. Same way you could be over, you get malchus for kazayas. Why can't you kaim shimur for example? What? Saying you need to eat a kazayas, but kazayas is also fulfilled by eating a beria. So why can't you eat a whole mark?
So we said it's a stalk.
Huh?
We said it's just one stalk.
When maybe it's the whole thing. Okay, let's even say it's the whole thing. But the way the place can discuss it is one stalk should be enough to be a beria. I was wondering that. But the way it's discussed is not. The Magen Avraham said
it was a retarded cat. It came out this big.
Get a tiny one. I'm sure they can find tiny ones by now. Okay, all right. They'll find it. So the Magen Avraham says you can't. The shaila is, what does Magen Avraham? Why not? It's machlekes of Kveger and the Prima Godim, how to understand this Magen Avraham. I'm trying to remember what the svaras are now. I think one of them says, I forget which one says which, but one of them, either Kveger or the Prima Godim, one of them says that the svara for the Magen Avraham is exactly the svara, that since part of the morer is not actually included in the achilus morer, like the bottom part of the stalk is not considered bitter to be included in the achilus morer. It's completely tasteless. So since part of that is, you have a beria that's half morer and has a little bit that's not morer. So even though you ate an entire beria, that's not considered a beria. What?
Even though rive is.
Even though rive is, it doesn't matter that rive is. They say it's not enough to be considered a beria. Why don't we say bitul b'rov is a good question. Maybe we'll get to in a second. But that's what one of them said. The other one learned the Magen Avraham differently, and I forgot to look it up. I forget how they learned the Magen Avraham, but they don't learn it this way. So I would say that's just machlekes. The machlekes are taking the Prima Godim, and I know I'm not explaining it clearly because I'm forgetting who said what. But one of them says one, of them says the other. I'll get back to you on that. Okay. If anyone ever actually watches this. they'll remind me. They'll text me and remind me. I'll check the views in like a few weeks. Yeah, the Hanukkah Malmaka views are going up. Moshe Wolf's video is going up like crazy. It's clickbait.
What
Okay.
happened? Do you know?
It's a short that and it has his beautiful face on it, so it's going up like crazy. People think it's as far as advertising, they think it's about you, and then they
That's clickbait.
right, yeah. But the shiurim for some reason have not jumped in the same way. But anyway, okay. If anyone ever watches this, remind me to find out who's calling me. Aryeh, I need
wants to know.
food. They had very little food by the bar mitzvah. Okay. Yes. He was at a bar mitzvah and and apparently they didn't serve enough food. Okay, he's gonna have to talk to his mother about that. Or come here if he wants. Good schnitzel. Right. Anyway, okay, fine. You remind me to look up who says what. But anyway, this is the same shiur Minchas Chinuch is having, whether or not there's beria, half, when half is a beria and half is not, is the machlekes by Morer, creating the Prima Garden, how to learn this Magen Avram, that you can't be yotze with a beria of Morer and say that you ate a beria and it's good enough to eat a kazai. So my grandmother ever knew that this was a possibility. She would have, every year would have gone crazy with my father about this. And about the beria as far. So anyway, what's the shaila? What does it depend on? So there's a machlekes what the svara is that a beria. Why is a beria more? The ma'aseh you have to eat a kazayis. Why is a beria any better? So the way Taisus explains it, he says, is because the Torah said don't eat this. When the Torah said don't eat a gid hanasha, it can't be you ate an entire gid hanasha and you're not over. Right? If the Torah said eat a certain whatever it is, don't do wherever else you apply this or don't eat a bug. It can't be you're not really being over the lav and you're not getting malchus on it when you eat an entire bug. It's as far as if the Torah said don't eat this thing, it has to apply it. If that's the svara, then you could hear very logically, what the Minchas Chinuch is saying. That's true when the entire thing is usher. That's what the Torah was talking about. It was talking about a gid hanasha with the entire gid hanasha is usher. It was talking about the bug, the entire bug is usher. It was telling you to eat a morah with entire morah is morah. If it's half and half, then that's not what the Torah meant. You lose the svara. But Rashi says it differently. Rashi says in Shuas that the reason why a beria is more usher is because it's an achila chashuva. Eating an entire thing is an achila chashuva. They give you a little mini hamburger, right? You ate a hamburger. It's an achila chashuva. It doesn't matter how small it is. They'll charge you $26 for it, and it's a little tiny hamburger, and you're good.
The idea of a berry is that you never had to cut it off to something else. That's the idea of a berry.
You ever had to what?
You don't have to cut it. You don't have. That's what it is. If you have one,
When you have a solid piece of something, Rabbi Rashi says it, it's an achila chashuv, even if it's not a
solid piece means that you never had
a
to
whole
cut it
thing.
off. Yes, but you never was broken off of something else.
Okay. What do you mean by never broken off of something else?
With an ant, you have an ant.
It's a characteristic.
Same, but again, a noshel was taken out of the animal. I mean,
Yeah, but
okay. Right.
ant was an egg and then it became an ant. Something.
Right. Okay.
For what?
But I don't know that that's. I'm not sure. I think you're basically saying the same thing Rashi's saying. I'm just saying when you eat an entire thing, that's considered a achila chashuva, regardless of how big it is. So if you go with Rashi's svara, then it could be it doesn't matter half is usher, half is mutter. An achila chashuva is an achila chashuva. It doesn't matter, right? Now when I said you did an achila chashuva and you ate a gid hanasha, you should be over. Yesh lachar. If that would be totally in this
We still
sorry.
go back to the Torah never asked us everything. Even if it was.
But that's not the svara beria according to Rashi. It has nothing to do with the fact that the Torah asked it. Rashi's svara is just that it's an achila. It's just that it's an achila chashuva. If it's an achila chashuva, it's
burial. But
eating a whole bug is an achila chashuva, and it doesn't matter that half the bug is mutter and half the bug is aser. That's an achila chashuva that you eat an entire thing.
But if there's no isser, then it doesn't matter.
Half of it is aser.
If you say something which is half and half.
But the point is, only half of this bug is aser. So you want to tell me you didn't eat a kazayas. You're not going to get malchus, right? So, but according to Rashi, it doesn't matter. You did an achila chashuva. You ate a bug now, and half that bug happens to be aser. So you did an achila chashuva on an aser bug. Maybe the achila chashuva has to be also an achila chashuva shel iser.
Yeah.
Maybe. My natil would be not doing. Natil would be achila chashuva. You done is an achila chashuva. Once it's an achila chashuva, if there's any iser in there, it would be a problem of beria. One other thing that the Minchas Chinuch says, we'll finish with this. Maybe we'll do a little nikra stuff because I promised to do a little bit of that. But the Minchas Chinuch says as follows. He wants to say that now he's talking about. Okay, so you have this gid hanasha, and it grows a little bit, right? So he says, as it grows, the part that grows after it's alive is mutter. Again, you have the animal is cut out of its mother's stomach. The mother was shechted and it's there. And it's rolling around, it's mutter. That animal's... The part that was there already is usher. If you hold like the Shitas Rambam. The Gid Hanasha is usher. The part that grows is mutter. That's what he was saying in the Minchas Chinuch. That was as far. The part that grows after it's alive is mutter. It's the opposite of what you'd think, but that's what he says. The reason being, he says, because it's already considered shechted. You can't have something that's coming on an animal that's already considered shechted that becomes usher now. Let's get on Nasha. It's not alive, it's shechted, he's saying. It's a story he brings from earlier Achronim, that you can't, once it's considered shechted, what grows afterwards can't become usher. So now he says, okay, but say a concept called kama batal. Every little bit becomes batal in what was already there. There's a nice solid Gid Hanasha there. Every little bit it grows becomes batal and becomes Gid Hanasha shel Isser, and every little bit becomes usher, and that's how it's a svara applied in other places by Einesa and other places in Halacha we apply this svara kama batal.
To every lens that is in there. It's
right.
Like one stretch of the lens.
And as it grows every little bit, it becomes usher, and it just keeps expanding. So he says, he brings from a Ran and a Dharma, a very famous Ran, that you cannot be mevatel, heter, and isser. Bittul is only isser becoming batel and heter. The pig becomes batel in the delicious chicken soup. That's being mevatel isser in something shall heter. So mevatel something that's mutter and something that's usser. The Ran says there's no such thing. If bittul does not apply, isser cannot be mevatel heter. Only heter can be mevatel isser. So the Minchas Chinuch says over here also what? Minchas Chinuch says, let's see what the story is, but Minchas Chinuch says, who are then over here? By this, what do you have? Let's get the case clear. You have an animal that's a ben pekua. The Gid Hanasha, this ben pekua was usher. Now, what grows after it's alive is mutter, because its mother shchita was considered already shechted. So that gave it a shame being shechted already. So what grows now is mutter. Zok Minchas Chinuch, you can't be mevatel that in the isser that was already there. Isser cannot be mevatel heter. Only heter can be mevatel. Only heter can be mevatel isser. That's.
This is assuming that we could tell that we know what was grown and what was original.
No, even if he's saying even if not, but the fact that you know that there was a big Gid Hanasha that had a little bit, it would become.
Even if, like, how do you know what? Like, let's assume you're.
So he said the nafkamina is either for beria. That's what he said. He said, you're right. How are you going to know? You're going to have it be bigger, and you might be always eating some isser.
Right.
So he says either nafkamina is that you didn't eat a beria. For that was one nafkamina he said, or it could be that once it becomes roiv shel heter, then it's mevatel back the isser. But he says there's no kama batal here. There's no isser mevatel heter because it can't. Now, just throw this out. That what is the svara? Why can't isser be mevatel heter? So B'chanan explains as follows. He says it's based on a I don't know if he says this or just the Welt says this, but it's based on a svara from the Einig Yontiv. Very famous truth from the Einig Yontiv. If let's say you have out of the tzitzis, 3 of the 4 strings were made l'shma, and the 4th one was done shaloi l'shma. And so why doesn't it say you have bittul on it, bittul b'roiv, that the 4th one is now considered l'shma? So it says you can't bittul. L'shma is something that needs to be created in the tzitzis. It has to be made l'shma. You can't create a shame with bittul. You can just remove a status of something through bittul. You can remove, chazer has a status of being trade, you can remove that status through bittul. You cannot create a status through bittul. You can't create a din l'shma. So Rabbi Chanan says, hu adin, heter cannot become batal and isser, because isser is a status. Isser is something that applies something. It's kilayim, it's treif. So treif cannot turn heter into treif, because that's creating a status on something.
Is that the label?
Yeah. Label's another way to refer to it. It can't create something, it can only remove something. That's a very logical scar. That bittul should only be able to remove a status, not create a status. So the question is then, would it apply here? This is what I want to know. Let's think what we think if it would apply here. I'm not sure myself.
So logical. Well, I mean, the answer is it gets subsumed into another existing status. That's the idea.
It gets subsumed into another existing status, but it can't take on a new status.
What do you mean that? That's what's happening in Bittul by Travis.
What?
If you put some, I'm saying
Bittul Trevis is just losing the shame tarfus. It's not becoming. Right, it's getting subsumed. And that's the thing. Kosher is not a shame. That's the thing. Kosher is not a shame. Kosher is this animal is mutar b'achila. The Torah created isurim. Isur is the shame. The shame chazer is the shame that the Torah created. This is a treif animal. What? It could.
The status quo.
Is it?
It-
What?
That's how.
Do I? If you want to just take your word for it, but I don't understand.
You could argue the fact. I'm not saying you have to take my word on it, but that's how. That's how. That's how
Get
Bechana.
that. Like, how does that make? Like, if we have certain
I think
laws
if you
of
would-
how it has to be eaten, how it has to be.
I believe
shechted,
if you would,
like-
there's a concept called l'chochum l'tipish. You ever heard of the concept? Concept is you take a guy, you're supposed to poll people basically. It's like a Gemara way of, if you want to find out what a Muscarishan is, you take 100 people who, they're not total fools, but they're not the biggest lamdanim either, and ask them a question 100 times.
Man argument?
Yeah, and basically see what most of them would say. I believe most people, if you would ask what their muscarishon is in this thing, what is the creation of the shame, this I think most people would say that Isser is the creation of the shame of something.
You have a job to do.
But
I disagree with that.
okay. Obviously you disagree, but okay. I was gonna say something insulting, but
I didn't know.
yeah, okay.
So maybe it doesn't apply.
Yeah, but anyway, okay. That's what Rabbi Chana wants to say the Svar of the Rishonim. But now I want to know. Let's accept this Svar. What would you think Ben Pakua is? Now I understand the problem with these things is you can go both ways, but that's kind of why they're interesting to think about. What would you think a Ben Pakua is? Is it normally the default as an animal is that it needs shchita. We gave it a shame of being shachot al yedei, the fact that its mother was shechted already. So we gave it a name. So you're not. So by saying what's he trying to say? What is this for? You have this gid hanasha. This gid hanasha is aser. Now the little bit that came on afterwards is considered already being shechted. So that's heter. So the heter can't become batal and isser. But the whole reason why heter can't become batal and isser is because you can't create a shame isser. You're not creating a shame here. You're just removing the shame that it was something that was already shechted. Right? You're removing the shame that was something that was shechted, and memela give it a shame gid hanasha. No, but shchita, everyone is going to agree, is a new shame. I mean, if you were to apply Rabbi Chanan Tzvara to say this piece of meat, be mavatal this piece of meat in something, and give it where it needs a status of being shechted, you wouldn't do that. Status of being shechted is a status. Shchita was done to it. So you're trying to say that shchita was done to this thing. You're creating a status on it, or you're just saying no. We're creating the status of the gid hanasha on it. It's hard to know exactly which one is the creation of the status in all these things. So when you're bringing out is a good point. It's always going to be hard to know what's the creation of the status, what's the removal of the status, and you can probably clear this from in every case in the world. But I'm just wondering if it's a direct image here in this case. He's just making a blanket svar. A heter can't become batal and isser. Maybe over here the heter is gufa creating a shame. Shchita. I'm not 100% sure.
The Isser is actually creating the on the heter an Isser. I mean, you're saying that it's making a shame on it. We said it's just keeping the constant shame that it was.
You're asking that. That's what Yehuda's saying. Maybe you'll look at it. Maybe you always look at every Yisr that way.
Never lost it.
Okay, I just said I would do once we're in gid hanasha, just a little bit lemaisa what nikar is, just so we should be somewhat educated in it. It's the Ramah says in two places, which is the most important thing to know about these things, is that you cannot do nikar based on a book or anything like that. It's something that has to come to Messiah, a clear Messiah and a clear shimush how to do it. What nikar is essentially cleansing the animal. We do it for a number of reasons. We have to get rid of the gid hanasha, get rid of the chalev. There's a lot of chalev, particularly in the hind part of the animal, and there's also these big blood vessels that have to be gotten out that malicha is not going to get rid of. And you really have to know what you're doing to do nikar properly. It's about 500 years ago or so, it already started being recording that a minhag was developing to just basically ditch the whole thing and sell the whole hind part of the animal to goyim, and not really have Jews doing this anymore. And this seemed to have picked up in certain places. And the question, just the controversy behind it becomes, okay, now, so it went on a long time that this became the minhag in many places. So what lemaisa now? If you do have a Messiah, how to do it? Someone really got a clear Messiah and how to do it, or can we bring it back doing it? Especially because there are communities that seem to have done it straight without breaking.
What was the reason?
It's been different places. Well, it's
I
again.
know a guy who knows how to do it.
But that's
Not everyone agrees. That's what we're talking
They
about.
will not.
What happened now? There's a hechsher place comes up that they would.
Rabbi, can you open one up? I want to get a nice.
It's not my business. After the Yechiel's father. What?
What was the reason?
It's good stuff.
So the Marshal wrote. I think it was the Marshal wrote that in his time, people were starting to cut corners. He says about Nikar. It was getting very laborsome, and there were so many chumras. Therefore, people were starting to cut corners. So he said he was makabel basically not to do it. That's how some people record the Marshal. If you look at the Marshal inside, he doesn't say that. The Marshal says he was makabel not to do it unless it was like double or triple checked, or something like that. He doesn't even say he was makabel not to do it. But other people over the years have said, Rabbi Yonasan Eifshitz was a doer that he was a master menaker, but he said he would only be samech on his nikar. He wouldn't do it on anyone else's. Rabbi Yehuda did it. I think Sam Sofer says in his where he was, no one was doing nikar anymore. Different things. What was interesting is that in Yerushalayim for a long time was under Sephardish control from after the time of the Inquisition until like mid 1800s with Shmuel Salan coming in and Yeshua Leib, it switched more Ashkenaz, and it seems that they didn't do Nikra when it was under Sephardi control, and Fakert and Shmuel Salant and the Ashkenaz people brought back doing Nikra. Now it's flipped that the Sephardish, Machbod Heksher in Yerushalayim, he's one of the famous people who wrote different shuvas about this, that he believes even for Ashkenazim can rely on his nikar and can eat the different restaurants of his. Some of them do it, some don't. Is it Ahlu Teman? Is it this, that, whatever? Which one? Go through all the different restaurants. I think Ahlu Teman does not have any nikar stuff, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So, but there are people who eat it even at places where he does have it. What?
Didn't they have
So different places had it and different places didn't. I said no, Yehuda did it. But anyway, that's the basic idea. It's just a shaila of practically do you have a Messiah on it and whether or not we want to rely on it. But Etzim, there's no reason. It doesn't seem like there's any reason in halacha why we can't, if we have a strong Messiah, be relying on it. It's not like something that the Ramah said he can't do.